Hello everyone, welcome to the study guide on Allen Ginsberg's poem Kaddish. Introduction. Kaddish is a 5-part free verse elegy Ginsberg wrote for his mother, Naomi Ginsberg, 1894 to 1956. It is widely regarded as one of his masterpieces, a deeply personal outpouring of grief, memory, and spiritual questioning. The poem is named for the Jewish morning prayer, and Ginsberg uses it as a framing device even as he laments a mother he buried with no Kaddish said. The sections move between metaphysical reflections, vivid recollections of Naomi's life and mental illness, and ritualistic invocations. Section 1. It opens with the speaker walking through Manhattan, Greenwich Village, clear winter noon, and reflecting on Naomi's death. Strange, now to think of you, gone without corsets and eyes, while I walk on the sunny pavement of Greenwich Village. Here, Ginsberg adopts a contemplative, almost philosophical tone, pondering death as both relief and loss. He imagines that death let her out and is a mercy. Death had the mercy, you are done with the century, done with yourself at last, pure. In section 1, he wanders memory, recalling Naomi's immigrant childhood, eating poisonous tomatoes in Newark, her early life, and the idea that death finally freed her from suffering. He describes grief as a lion that eats the soul, a fearsome image of loss. By the end of part 1, he alternates between relief that his mother is at peace and anguish at his own abandonment of faith, done with God. Section 2. This section shifts to harrowing biography of Naomi. Ginsberg recounts her life in disjointed, often violent episodes. Her first nervous breakdown in 1919, her delusions and paranoia, breakdowns and institutionalizations throughout the 1920s and 40s. The tone is fragmented, capturing Naomi's psychosis, seeing mystical assassins from Newark, fearing radio wires in her head and Nazi conspiracies. Ginsberg quotes her in childhood, "We become an onion, a cabbage, a carrot," as a metaphor for death, and in later years, "I saw God in a cheap cabin. He likes lentil soup," followed by her serving him bland fish. He describes her breakdowns, vomiting blood, escaping hospitals, turning on her sisters, and her forced electroconvulsive therapy and lobotomy. Toward the end of part 2, Ginsberg interweaves the traditional Kaddish hymn in Aramaic alongside Naomi's narrative. The climax of part 2 shows Ginsberg finally mourning openly. He invokes a joyous vision of her youth, the communist beauty, long black hair crowned with flowers, who played mandolin in summer camps, even as he acknowledges her destruction. In his words, he immortalizes the image now that she's gone. This marks a turning point. The poet ceases trying to understand her death abstractly and accepts grief. The section ends with a prayer-like hymn, blessing Naomi's suffering and death. Blessed be death, merging Jewish liturgy with personal lament. Section 3 is a final summation. It runs through memory only to have not forgotten all the sufferings she endured. Early deaths in the family, loneliness, war, long hospital wards, the 300 shocks of ECT, the transformation into a small broken woman. It culminates on her last night in the hospital. Ginsberg imagines this dark night on iron bed as his mother dies with her head on a pillow to die. The famous image of the key is in the sunlight at the window comes here from Naomi's final letter, symbolizing a message to the living. He envisions one last, everlasting light in the familiar blackout of her death. Section 3 serves as the emotional climax, Naomi's life and death fully recorded and her passing finally accepted. Section 4 is a litany to farewells to his mother. Each couplet begins, "O mother, farewell," pairing an intimate detail of her life or body with a valediction. He bids goodbye to mundane and strange images, a long black shoe, a broken stocking, 6 dark hairs on the wen of your breast, your fear of Hitler, your fingers of rotten mandolins, and so on. These concrete images highlight Naomi's working class immigrant life, pickles of Newark, Patterson strike belly, New Jersey porches, etc., as well as her physical decay. The repeated "with your" creates a hypnotic morning litany. It culminates in "with your death full of flowers," echoing the death and flowers motif from earlier Death Full of Flowers and transforming them into a final tender symbol. This section's minimalist style, short lines, repetition, imitates ritual farewell. Section 5 functions as a final hymn or dirge. Its voice reaches outward and upward in praise and despair. Caw, caw, caw of crows appears alongside repeated calls to Lord, blending natural and divine imagery. Over graves in Long Island, gravestones, Ginsberg prays that his soul and Naomi's might meet, my half-life and my own as hers, under the grass. He cries out to God, Lord, great I, grinder of great beyonds, and accepts the universal forces of time and memory, the call of time, the roar of memory. The refrain, Lord, 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 caw, 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 Lord, fills the sky, a wild, ecstatic conclusion that fuses mourning, caw of death birds, and invocation. After this chanted exhalation, the poem ends, not with a rubric, but with dates. Paris, December 1957, New York, 1959, reminding the reader of where and when Ginsberg wrote it. Literary form, style, and structure. Form. Kaddish is written in prose-like free verse. It has no regular rhyme scheme or meter. Lines run on with heavy enjambment and punctuation is sparse. The form is closer to a spontaneous, breath-driven monologue than a traditional structured poem. Ginsberg's style reflects his beat roots. Think jazz-like improvisation and long lines. Critics note his use of an irregular meter articulated to his breathing and cadence, and of eyeball kicks, sudden, startling word choices placed together to create a fragmented, stream of consciousness tone. This technique makes the poem feel raw and urgent, as if it was spoken aloud in fits and starts. Voice and tone. The poem's tone shifts between frantic, confessional, and visionary. In part 1, the voice is contemplative and philosophical. By part 2, it becomes chaotic and hyper-real, echoing Naomi's psychosis. By the end, it turns ritualistic and exultant, Lord, caw, caw, caw. Throughout, Ginsberg's persona speaks directly to his mother, to God, and to memories themselves. The mixture of sacred Hebrew prayers and profane graphic bodily imagery and sexual references creates startling contrasts. Structure. Ginsberg divides Kaddish into 5 numbered sections. Each has a distinct focus and style. Section 1. Philosophical and urban reflections. Monday night city scenes, reflection on death. Section 2. Narrative biography. Naomi's life story, childhood, mental breakdowns, her present delusions, culminating in a lyrical prayer. Section 3. Summative epilogue. Recounting tragedies and Naomi's last night, ending with transcendental key imagery. Section 4. Litany of farewells. Repetitive, with your lines, intimate images. Section 5. Final hymn, addressing God and death, merges crow calls and praises. Literary influences. Ginsberg consciously weaves in literary and religious references. He reads Shelley's Adonis aloud in part 1 and read Adonis's last triumphant stanzas aloud, wept, and quotes Jewish liturgy. The Aramaic Kaddish prayer fragment appears in part 2 with no translation. He alludes to Eastern religious ideas as well. Buddhism, Buddhist Book of Answers in part 1, reflecting the Beat generation's interest in non-Western spirituality. The vocabulary includes Yiddish terms like milds in Naomi's speech and Isaac Bashevis singer-like Jewish idioms, all layered atop everyday American urban slang. As one critic notes, Ginsberg grew up amid Jewish prayers and languages, yet was adamantly atheist. So Kaddish uses them more for poetic effect than devotion. Sound and imagery. The poem's language is charged with color and sound. Alliteration and assonance leap in long lines. Battlements of window office buildings shouldering each other. And anaphora drives the litany, O mother, farewell, farewell. Vivid, often jarring images abound. Amputated body parts, like without eyes, poisoning, blood and feces, rotting hospitals, alongside pastoral visions, daisies, summer among daisies, and cosmic vistas, an echo in the sky. This collage of imagery, urban, medical, natural and religious, mirrors Naomi's fractured experience and the speaker's swirling grief. And now, thematic analysis. Grief and mourning. The entire poem is an elegy. Ginsberg openly confronts his sorrow over Naomi's death. The tone swings between resigned acceptance and anguished crying out. As scholar Sam Clark writes, Ginsberg's declarations serve as emotional catharsis. He expresses relief that his mother rests and is free of suffering. Yet he is tormented by guilt and loss. The poem personifies grief as a predatory lion that eats the soul, conveying how raw and consuming the pain is. The repeated O Mother farewell list in part 4 and the final Lord, 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 Caw, 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 Lord in part 5 act as ritualistic mourning, blending Jewish burial rites with beat poetry's catharsis. Madness and mental illness. Naomi's schizophrenia is central. Ginsberg chronicles her paranoid hallucinations, radio-controlled thoughts, demons, Nazi conspiracies, her suicide attempts, and the medical treatments, insulin shock, metrazole, lobotomy, that disfigured her. He portrays madness with sympathy and horror. He both exposes its grotesqueness, varicosed, nude, fat, doomed, and humanizes his mother's suffering. This reflects Ginsberg's own experiences. He spent months institutionalized as a young man. Critics note that Kaddish is at once visceral about her insanity and deeply compassionate. Naomi's descending into a paranoid, delusive state serves as a microcosm for human vulnerability. Madness here is also a vehicle for exploring reality versus illusion. The poem forces the reader to navigate hallucinatory imagery with Alan's cautious guidance. We cannot believe Naomi's spies, so we empathize with her terror instead. Spirituality and religion. Kaddish is rife with religious imagery, but in a complex way. The title invokes the Jewish mourner's prayer, and Ginsberg includes traditional Hebrew lines. Yet, Ginsberg, an avowed atheist, uses them ironically. The solemnity of liturgy contrasts with Naomi's profane life and her atheistic Marxist views. As Justin Deutsch notes, the Jewish phrases in Kaddish become symbols of both belonging and detachment. Naomi, who once had communist faith, dies with prayers on her lips that Ginsberg does not understand. Ginsberg appeals to God and Eastern concepts, Buddha, Nirvana, Great Universe, when trying to make sense of death. Ultimately, the poem transcends specific doctrine. It incorporates Jewish customs, Shema, burial liturgy, alongside references to Shelley, Orientalism, and beat mysticism. In the end, Naomi's death is both a personal loss and universal event. The poem's final chanting to Lord and images of Sheol suggest a cosmic, possibly redemptive vision beyond life and madness. Jewish identity and heritage. Ginsberg repeatedly invokes Jewish history and language. Naomi's family is Jewish, emigrated from Eastern Europe. Ginsberg uses Yiddish words, for example, Svul Avram, his Hebrew Yiddish name, and pictures his mother amidst Jewish environments, the Lower East Side, Workmen's Circle, etc. Yet both he and she are largely secular communists. The poem grapples with his dissonance. Ginsberg mourns in a Kaddish that contains no reference to death in tradition, even as he is riddled with thoughts of death. He never fully prays the Kaddish. Instead, he inserts one living voice, hers, into it. This reflects his estrangement from his born religion. The mix of secular and sacred, calling her Holy Mother, yet mocking Nazi spirits, highlights Ginsberg's conflicted Jewishness. Grossman observed that Ginsberg's title is aggressively Jewish, even though the poem in itself is not conventionally Jewish. Thus, Kaddish becomes a liturgical elegy. It reclaims Jewish ritual language to mourn outside of orthodoxy. Mortality and acceptance. A key theme in the tension between the inevitability of death and the desire for transcendence. Naomi's death confronts Alan with his own mortality. The poem constantly asks, what is beyond the grave? And vacillates between nihilism and hope. In part 1, he briefly flirts with nihilism. Death is the remedy all singers dream of. And in section 3, he imagines a unifying everlasting light. The imagery of flowers, keys, and light in her deathbed suggests renewal. Critics see Kaddish as a catabasis, descent into darkness followed by spiritual rebirth. By the end, Ginsberg is exhausted and awed. He offers a psalm in his head that praises even the void after death. Ultimately, Naomi's passing becomes both a personal loss and a moment of transcendence. He learns to praise God after death, despite emptiness. Family and guilt. Underlying the poem is Ginsberg's ambivalence about his role in Naomi's life. He feels guilt for having her institutionalized, for leaving her, and even in how he responds to her madness. Lines in part 2. You should have seen me. Would she care? She needs a lover. Show his desperate, conflicted reaction to her sexual advances. Part 4's farewell. Litany may be his way of absolving himself. he methodically bids goodbye to every fault and every suffering she endured. Biographical sources note that Ginsberg himself underwent psychiatric treatment. He pleaded insanity in a 1949 trial, and thus Kaddish wrestles with the costs of sanity, responsibility, and survival amid family trauma. Historical and biographical context. Beat Generation and 1950s America. Kaddish was written between 1957 to 59 and published in 1961 in the post-World War II era when beat writers were reacting against conformity. Ginsberg was a leading beat poet, having shockingly published Howl in 1956. The poem reflects Cold War anxieties, Naomi's fears of Nazis, fascists, spies during the McCarthy era, and the beat counterculture's rebellion, open sexuality, drug use. It also mirrors the Beats' interest in Eastern religion and a search for authenticity amid materialism. A 2013 UCLA retrospective on Kaddish notes that the poem laments his mother and his own estrangement from Judaism, tying personal grief to broader generational disillusionment. Naomi Ginsberg, or Nee Patchen. Naomi came from a Jewish family in the Russian Pale of Settlement. She immigrated to the US as a child, depicted via the Orchard Street scenes in Part 1, and settled in Paterson, New Jersey. In 1926, she married Louis Ginsberg, Ellen's father, a high school English teacher and poet. Naomi was politically active. She held leftist communist beliefs and lived through pogroms, war, and the Depression. From the mid-1930s on, she suffered severe mental illness, schizophrenia, hospitalizations, electroshock therapy, and lobotomy. Naomi died on June 9, 1956, 2 days after lobotomy, poverty-stricken and alone. Ellen was devastated. Kaddish is essentially his attempt to write the Kaddish prayer that no one had recited for her. According to his 1979 biography, he began writing it in Paris, Beat Hotel, late 1957, and completed it in New York by 1959. Allen Ginsberg's life. Born 1926 in Newark, New Jersey, to Louis and Naomi Ginsberg, Allen had a younger brother Eugene, who became a lawyer, and an older half-sister Eleanor, who also died young. He was precocious and artistic, writing poetry in high school, and also gay. In 1949, he spent time in a mental hospital after pleading insanity for robbery, an experience that deepened his empathy for the mentally ill. In the 1950s, he was a central beat figure, friends with Jack Kerouac and William Burroughs, and authored Howl. During Howl's obscenity trial in 1957, his mother died. When Kaddish appeared in Kaddish and Other Poems 1958-60, City Lights 1961, it became one of his most acclaimed works. Ginsberg continued writing about personal and social issues throughout the 1960s. Notably, later in life, he embraced Buddhism and activism, which casts Kaddish as a turning point toward his spiritual searching. Naomi's shadow and legacy. Ginsberg once said all his poetry came from his mother's grave. Naomi's tumultuous life clearly haunts every line of Kaddish. The poem itself became part of Naomi's legacy. She is immortalized as a complex figure, both loving mother, playing mandolin and cooking, and mad woman. In interviews, Ginsberg remarked that writing Kaddish was an exorcism of his demons, and indeed the poem exorcises both Naomi's and Ellen's pain together. In 2013, The New York Jewish Week noted that Kaddish glorifies God just as much as traditional Kaddish, indicating Ginsberg's torn feelings. He uses God language in his mother's eulogy, even while feeling distant from religion. So, this was the study guide on Allen Ginsberg's poem Kaddish. We will meet in the next video and discuss some other poem. Until then, goodbye and thank you.